Close your eyes for just a moment and think back. Think back to a time when the biggest event of the entire year wasn't a vacation, wasn't a birthday, and certainly wasn't anything on a screen. It was Christmas morning. That magical, almost unbearable moment when you crept down the stairs in your pajamas, rubbing sleep from your eyes, and there it was, sitting under the tree, wrapped in paper that you were about to destroy in approximately 4 seconds flat. That feeling, that pure, unfiltered joy that hit you like a wave before you even knew what the gift was. That's what we're talking about today. The 1960s and 1970s were a golden era for toys. Not golden in the way people casually throw that word around, but genuinely golden, a period when toy makers were dreaming big, taking risks, and producing playthings that didn't just entertain children, they shaped entire childhoods. These weren't toys that needed charging, didn't require Wi-Fi, and didn't come with a subscription. They ran on imagination, on neighborhood friendships, on rainy afternoons and summer sidewalks. They were built from metal, rubber, plastic, and pure ingenuity, and they left marks on a generation that time simply cannot erase. Today we are taking a deep, nostalgic dive into the most wanted, most beloved, most desperately wished for Christmas toys from the 1960s and 1970s. Some of these you'll recognize instantly. Some might send a jolt straight through your chest the moment you hear the name. And a few might genuinely surprise you. We're going to talk about where these toys came from, why kids went absolutely crazy for them, and what made them so much more than just objects under a tree. So whether you lived through this era or you're just now discovering what childhood used to look like, settle in. This is going to be one beautiful trip down memory lane. Let's start at the very beginning of our timeline, because in 1960, a French inventor named André Cassains introduced something to the world that would quietly become one of the most iconic toys in history. Originally called l'écran magique, meaning the magic screen, the concept was eventually picked up by the Ohio Art Company, who rebranded it, invested heavily in television advertising, and launched it onto American store shelves under the name we all know, the Etch-a-Sketch. What made the Etch-a-Sketch so captivating was its beautiful simplicity. A bright red rectangular frame. A flat gray screen. 2 white knobs, one for horizontal movement, one for vertical. Turn both at once and you could draw diagonal lines. The inside of the screen was coated with aluminum powder, and the knobs controlled a tiny stylus that scraped that powder away, leaving dark lines behind. Shake it, and the image disappeared like it was never there. A blank canvas, ready again. Children went wild for it. Artists, engineers, daydreamers, it didn't matter what kind of kid you were, the Etch-a-Sketch had something for you. Some kids drew houses and cars. Others attempted portraits. A few rare talents created intricate architectural drawings that left adults genuinely speechless. And the rest of us just made a bunch of wobbly squares and called it abstract art. The beauty was that nobody judged you because nobody could do it perfectly, and that was somehow the whole point. The Etch-a-Sketch became a Christmas list staple almost immediately, and it never really left. Decades later, it still carries that same quiet magic. If there was a single toy that defined boyhood in the mid-1960s, it was G.I. Joe. Hasbro introduced him in 1964, and the toy world was never quite the same. Standing 12 inches tall, dressed in military gear, and equipped with more accessories than most adults own today, G.I. Joe was the first action figure ever marketed directly to boys on a large scale. Hasbro cleverly avoided the word doll at all costs, and the strategy worked brilliantly. Kids didn't just play with G.I. Joe. They went on missions with him. They constructed elaborate battlefields using couch cushions, garden dirt, and whatever else was available. His joints moved, his gear came off, and his face had this grizzled no-nonsense expression that told you he had seen things. Parents appreciated the patriotic angle. Boys appreciated everything else. Then in 1974, Hasbro made a change that sent the already devoted fanbase into absolute orbit. They gave G.I. Joe the Kung Fu grip. Instead of rigid plastic hands that could barely hold a toothpick, the new Joe had flexible, soft rubber hands that could actually grasp his equipment with something resembling realism. Rifles stayed in his grip. Ropes could be held. Equipment actually hung from his hands the way the commercials promised. It sounds like a small detail, but to a 7-year-old who had watched his Joe drop his weapon for the 1000th time, it was nothing short of revolutionary. Christmas lists that year had G.I. Joe underlined, circled, and starred. 1968. The year Mattel co-founder Elliot Handler looked at the existing market for toy cars, decided they weren't nearly exciting enough, and set out to build something that would make every kid on the block lose their mind. The result was Hot Wheels, small, sleek, die-cast metal cars with low-friction axles that rolled faster than anything children had ever seen, painted in bright metallic colors that practically glowed under a Christmas tree light. From the very first collection of 16 models, Hot Wheels weren't just toys. They were a culture. The orange plastic track became the foundation of living room racetracks that sprawled from the coffee table to the front hallway. Loops were constructed. Jumps were attempted. Speed records were passionately contested. Brothers argued. Friendships were tested. And through all of it, those little metal cars kept rolling. What Mattel understood brilliantly was that kids didn't just want to collect cars. They wanted to race them, crash them, and show them off. The cars were designed with actual automotive style in mind, many of them based on real vehicles with exaggerated proportions that made them look even more dramatic. By Christmas of 1968, Hot Wheels had outsold every other toy car on the market, and the brand has never truly lost that momentum. Original Hot Wheels cars from 1968 in mint condition now sell for extraordinary sums to collectors, but back then, they were simply the thing every kid pointed to in the Sears catalog and said, "That one. That's what I want." If you were a child in the mid-1970s and you watched television at all, you knew Steve Austin. The $6 Million Man, portrayed by Lee Majors on the hugely popular ABC series, was the ultimate hero, an astronaut rebuilt with bionic technology after a catastrophic accident, now faster, stronger, and equipped with a zoom lens eye that let him see things no ordinary human could. The show was appointment viewing, and in 1975, Kenner made sure every living room could have its own Steve Austin. The $6 Million Man action figure was packed with features that made it genuinely unlike anything else on the shelf. At 13 inches tall, he towered over most other figures. But the features were what sealed the deal. His right arm had a rollback panel of skin, revealing the bionic mechanics underneath. His right eye had a small hole drilled in the back of his head. You could look through it and see a magnified view, just like the show's iconic sound effect implied. When you lifted his bionic arm slowly, it made a clicking, ratcheting sound that immediately transported you into the world of the television series. Kids built entire spy headquarters around this toy. Cardboard box command centers. Couch cushion obstacle courses. Enemy bases constructed from anything available. Steve Austin didn't just sit on a shelf. He went on missions, rescued other toys, and defeated villains that existed only in the elaborate imaginations of children who had given themselves entirely over to play. It was the kind of toy that made the boundary between television and real life feel genuinely thin. Evel Knievel was the most daring man on the planet in the early 1970s. Dressed in a red, white, and blue leather jumpsuit and riding motorcycles off ramps toward rows of buses and fountains, he was simultaneously terrifying and completely irresistible to young audiences. When Ideal Toys released the Evel Knievel stunt cycle in 1973, they weren't just selling a toy. They were selling the feeling of that ramp, that launch, that breathtaking second before you know whether it worked. The mechanism was brilliant in its design. A gyroscopic system inside the motorcycle meant that once you revved it up using the hand-powered launcher, the bike would stabilize itself and tear across the floor with remarkable speed and balance. You'd place the cycle in the orange launcher, grab the handle, and pull it back, once, twice, 3 times, listening to that mechanical whirring build with each stroke. Then you released it, and that motorcycle shot across the room like it had somewhere important to be. Kids constructed ramps from anything available. Books were stacked. Sofa cushions were arranged. Younger siblings were occasionally positioned in the path of the oncoming bike, though that particular experiment rarely ended well for anyone involved. Sometimes Evel made the jump perfectly, touching down on the other side like a champion. Other times he crashed spectacularly, somersaulting through the air and landing on his head, which, honestly, was at least equally satisfying. The toy sold in massive numbers and remains one of the most recognized playthings of the entire decade. Before comic book superheroes dominated every movie theater on the planet, before the merchandise was everywhere, there was a brief and extraordinary window in the early 1970s when a toy company called Mego managed to secure the licensing rights to both Marvel and DC characters simultaneously. This achievement, which seems almost impossibly ambitious in retrospect, resulted in the world's greatest super heroes collection, a line of 8-inch fabric costumed action figures that sent children into absolute ecstasy. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Captain America, Wonder Woman, the Hulk, they were all there, wearing actual cloth costumes with removable accessories, sharing shelf space as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The figures had a simple jointed design that made them fun to pose and easy to play with, and their costumes gave them a tangible, tactile quality that purely plastic figures couldn't match. What made Mego figures particularly magical was the creative possibility they offered. You didn't just play with one hero, you staged crossover events. Batman teamed up with Spider-Man. Superman and Captain America compared notes. Enemies from one universe faced heroes from another in matchups that the comics themselves would never have authorized. For children in 1972, this was the entire concept of what if made real and physical. Mego's figures are now among the most avidly collected vintage toys in the world, and finding them in original packaging can lead to prices that would make your eyes water. By the late 1970s, electronic toys were beginning to make their presence felt, and nothing announced that arrival quite like Simon. Released by Milton Bradley in 1978, Simon was a circular, flying saucer-shaped device with 4 large colored panels, red, green, blue, and yellow, each producing its own distinct musical tone when pressed. The gameplay was elegantly simple. Simon would play a sequence of lights and sounds, and you had to repeat it exactly. Each successful round added one more step to the sequence, gradually escalating until the pattern became a genuine test of memory, concentration, and nerve. Simon was the kind of toy that created champions and humbled egos in equal measure. Getting deep into a long sequence, hands hovering over the colored panels, everyone in the room holding their breath, it was tense in a way that few toys had ever managed. The moment you hit the wrong panel, that buzzing failure sound felt like a personal affront. The moment you matched a sequence that felt impossibly long, you felt like the smartest person in the room. It wasn't just for kids, either. Parents played Simon. Older siblings played Simon. Dinner parties were interrupted by Simon. It crossed age boundaries in a way that few toys ever do, because the challenge it presented was genuinely universal. Sequence memory is something every human brain engages with, and Simon found a way to make that engagement thrilling. It was a Christmas gift that kept delivering long after the novelty should have worn off. Nothing in this entire list changed the landscape of childhood quite like the Atari 2600. Released in 1977 under its original name, the Atari VCS, this was the machine that brought the arcade into the living room. Before the 2600, video games were things you went somewhere to play, dark rooms full of loud machines that consumed quarters. After the 2600, they were something you had at home, on your television, available whenever you wanted. The console itself was unmistakable, a 6-switch unit with a distinctive wood-grain panel on the front, designed to look respectable enough that parents wouldn't object to its presence in the living room. The joystick was a simple black stick with a single red button, but that simplicity masked the worlds it could access. Space Invaders, Pitfall, Breakout, Combat, Asteroids, each cartridge was its own universe, and collecting them was a consuming obsession. What the Atari 2600 created, beyond entertainment, was a new kind of social experience. When one kid on the block got an Atari, everyone on the block eventually played it. You'd crowd around the television, take turns, argue about whose turn it was, and develop genuine expertise in games that your parents couldn't understand and honestly didn't want to. Christmas morning with an Atari 2600 under the tree was one of those memories that people still describe in specific, vivid detail decades later. The games look primitive now. The feeling they created was anything but. When Star Wars opened in theaters in May of 1977, the cultural shockwave it sent through American childhood was immediate and total. Kids who had never cared about science fiction were suddenly obsessed. And by Christmas of that year, every child in the country wanted one thing above all else: the characters. The ships. The universe, made small enough to hold in your hands. Kenner Toys had the license, but they faced an impossible logistical challenge. They simply could not produce the figures in time for the holiday rush. Their solution was one of the most audacious moves in toy marketing history: the early bird certificate package. An empty box, containing a certificate that promised 4 action figures, would be mailed to the purchaser in early 1978. Parents bought empty boxes and put them under the tree, and children accepted this with far more grace than you might expect, because the promise alone was enough. When the actual figures arrived, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Darth Vader, Chewbacca, R2-D2, C-3PO, and the rest, they became the defining toys of a generation. Standing at 3.75 inches, they were smaller than the G.I. Joes and Mego figures that came before them, but what they lacked in size they made up for in universe-building potential. The playsets arrived. The Millennium Falcon arrived. And suddenly entire bedrooms became galaxies far, far away. Original Star Wars figures in their packaging are among the most valuable vintage toys in existence today, with certain rare variants commanding thousands of dollars. But in 1977, they were simply the most wanted things on Earth. Long before video games gave children an outlet for competitive aggression, Rock'em Sock'em robots served that purpose with spectacular physical directness. Introduced by Marx Toys in 1966, the game featured two plastic robots, Red Rocker and Blue Bomber, mounted on a raised plastic ring and controlled by joystick paddles. Each player worked their robot's arms using the controls, maneuvering for position and throwing punches until one landed squarely on the opponent's chin, causing their head to pop up with a deeply satisfying click. The genius of Rock'em Sock'em was in its combination of strategy and excitement. It looked like a pure reaction game, but experienced players developed genuine technique, feinting, timing attacks, using angles. The noise was part of the experience too, the hollow plastic clatter of robot arms swinging, the crack of a clean connection, the click of the head popping up, and inevitably, someone shouting the game's unofficial catchphrase with tremendous enthusiasm. It became one of those toys that worked at Christmas dinner with the whole family watching. Adults played it. Grandparents attempted it. The competitive loop, reset the head, go again, winner stays, could consume an entire afternoon without anyone noticing the time passing. Rock'em Sock'em Robots remains in production today, a remarkable testament to a design that simply never needed improving. Not every beloved toy of this era was about speed or competition or explosive play. Spirograph, introduced to American children in 1967 after finding success in the United Kingdom, offered something different. A meditative, endlessly varied creative experience that produced results so beautiful they surprised even the child who made them. Designed by British engineer Dennis Fisher, Spirograph consisted of a set of plastic gears and rings of different sizes, along with colored pens. You'd pin a ring or frame to a piece of paper, nestle a smaller gear inside it, place a pen in one of the gear's holes, and begin moving it around the interior of the ring. The mathematical relationship between the sizes of the gears determined the pattern, a hypocycloid curve that traced out intricate, perfectly symmetrical designs that looked like they belonged in an art gallery rather than a child's bedroom. Part of Spirograph's appeal was its repeatability without predictability. You could use the same two gears multiple times, changing only which hole you place the pen in, and get meaningfully different results. Changing the colors mid-pattern introduced another layer of complexity. Children who had no particular interest in mathematics were quietly learning about ratios, symmetry, and geometric relationships through the simple act of moving a plastic gear around a ring. Parents loved giving it. Children loved receiving it. And the results, pinned to bedroom walls and refrigerator doors across America, were genuinely worth displaying. Some toys earned their place on Christmas wish lists through cleverness or novelty. Tonka trucks earned theirs through sheer, indestructible honesty. Made from pressed steel and built with a robustness that was almost comically excessive for a child's toy, Tonka trucks did exactly what they promised and nothing more, but what they promised was the feeling of operating real, heavy machinery, and they delivered it completely. The bright yellow dump truck was the flagship. It was large, it was heavy, it had a functional dumping bed, and it was essentially invulnerable to normal childhood abuse. You could drive it off a porch step repeatedly. You could fill it with actual dirt and gravel and work it through an actual muddy yard. You could leave it outside through a rainstorm, come back the next day, and it would be exactly as it was. Children who received Tonka trucks didn't just play with them, they went to work with them, constructing elaborate outdoor construction sites with the focused seriousness of tiny civil engineers. What made Tonka special in this era was its complete lack of pretension. There were no gimmicks, no electronics, no features to impress anyone. Just steel, wheels, and a design that respected what children actually wanted to do, which was dig, haul, and build in the dirt for hours. Generations of children have grown up with Tonka trucks, and the brand's legacy rests entirely on that foundation of honest, durable, imaginative play. What strikes you, looking back at all of these toys together, is how much they have in common beneath their obvious differences. None of them required a screen to mediate the experience. None of them told a child what to imagine or handed them a pre-written story. They were, each in their own way, invitations to create, to compete, to explore, to build, and to discover the particular pleasure of being completely absorbed in something for no reason other than the joy of the thing itself. The children who received these gifts under the trees of the 1960s and 1970s are grandparents now, in many cases. But ask any of them about that Christmas morning when the Atari was under the tree, or when G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip was waiting in the box, or when the Hot Wheels track was already assembled